Most people don't realize this, but the reason certain people keep draining you, disrespecting you, and pulling you into the same exhausting patterns has nothing to do with them being toxic, and everything to do with something you are unknowingly doing. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because this isn't about cutting people off, being more confident, or finally saying the perfect thing. In fact, if that's what you're relying on, you're already losing. What I'm about to share isn't comfortable. It challenges how you've been taught to handle difficult people. It exposes why confrontation hasn't worked, why explaining yourself made things worse, and why the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more likely you've been targeted. This is not motivational noise. This is a psychological shift that changes how people experience you instantly. If you've ever walked away from a conversation, replaying it in your head, thinking of what you should have said, if you've ever felt your body tense just because someone's name appeared on your phone, if you've ever wondered why certain people seem to have access to you, no matter how much distance you create, this video is for you. Because the truth is, toxic people don't stay because they're powerful. They stay because they're effective. And the moment they stop being effective, they disappear. Not dramatically, not emotionally, quietly. By the end of this video, you'll understand the one internal shift that makes boundaries automatic, silence authoritative, and calm unsettling to the very people who once controlled the dynamic. You won't need to announce anything. You won't need to explain yourself. You won't need to fight. And once you apply this, even once, you'll notice something strange. The same people who used to provoke you will hesitate. The conversations will shorten. The tension will evaporate, not because they changed well, but because you did. Stay with me. This isn't information, it's liberation. Most people misunderstand why toxic people choose them. They think it's because they're too kind, too empathetic, too patient, or too giving. And while those traits may be present, they are not the reason. Toxic people are not attracted to kindness. They are attracted to access. Emotional access, psychological access. The kind of access that allows them to reach inside you and move something. Strength does not repel toxicity. Emotional availability invites it. Here is the uncomfortable truth: most people avoid toxic individuals are highly observant. They are constantly scanning their environment, consciously or unconsciously, for nervous systems they can plug into. They notice who explains themselves too much, who reacts quickly, who feels compelled to clarify, defend, justify, or emotionally engage. They are not looking for weak people. They are looking for responsive people. Responsiveness is not the same as weakness, but in the presence of toxicity, it becomes a vulnerability. When someone says something sharp and you feel the urge to correct them, that urge is data. When someone disrespects you and your body tightens, that reaction is information. When someone misunderstands you and you feel a deep need to be understood, that is access. Toxic people are excellent at detecting these signals because they survive on them. Every emotional reaction you give teaches them something about you. It shows them where your self-worth is tied. It shows them what matters to you. It shows them where your internal stability lives and where it collapses. Over time, without realizing it, you train them. You teach them which words land, which silences disturb you, which accusations make you scramble to restore balance. This is not manipulation in a cinematic sense. It is behavioral conditioning in real time. This is why confrontation often fails. People assume that if they just say the right words, draw the right boundary, or finally stand up for themselves, the toxic behavior will stop. But boundaries spoken from emotional reactivity are not boundaries. They are invitations for escalation. Because what the toxic person hears is not the content of your words, but the emotional charge underneath them. They hear intensity, urgency, need, and need is leverage. Toxic people do not stay where they are ineffective. They stay where they are impactful. If they can still move you emotionally, they remain engaged. If they can still disrupt your internal state, they continue. This is why some people can say very little and command immense respect, while others explain themselves endlessly and are still dismissed. Respect is not generated by clarity alone. It is generated by emotional self-containment. Psychologically speaking, many toxic dynamics are regulation strategies. The toxic individual is dysregulated internally, and they use external emotional reactions to stabilize themselves. Your anger, your sadness, your defensiveness, Even your attempts to fix things become tools for them to discharge tension or feel significant. When you react, they regulate. When you don't, they are forced to sit with themselves, and most cannot tolerate that. This is where philosophy quietly enters the conversation. If your sense of self depends on how others interpret you, then anyone who chooses to misinterpret you holds power. If your peace depends on being seen as good, fair, or reasonable, then anyone willing to distort reality can destabilize you. The more you outsource your internal validation, the more vulnerable you become to those who exploit it. Emotionally secure individuals do not need to prove their character in hostile environments. They understand something very simple: people committed to misunderstanding you are not confused, they are invested, and you cannot reason someone out of a position they emotionally benefit from maintaining. Trying to do so is not strength, it is self-betrayal disguised as maturity. This is why toxic people rarely bother individuals who are deeply grounded, not because those individuals are aggressive or intimidating, but because there is nothing to hook into. Their responses are measured, their silence is complete. Their sense of self does not rise or fall based on external noise. They are not emotionally vacant, but they are emotionally sovereign. There is a subtle but critical shift that happens when you understand this. You stop asking, "Why do they keep treating me this way?" and start asking, "What am I emotionally providing that makes this dynamic possible?" This question is not self-blame, it is self-reclamation. It returns agency to where it belongs. When you stop feeding the dynamic starves. When you no longer offer emotional fuel, the fire dies. This does not require cruelty. It does not require withdrawal from life. It requires internal discipline. The discipline to pause before reacting. The discipline to tolerate discomfort without resolving it externally. The discipline to let silence do the work your explanations never could. This is also why toxic people often escalate right before disappearing. When they sense emotional access closing, they push harder. They provoke more sharply. They attempt guilt, blame, or character attacks. This is not strength, it is panic. It is the last attempt to regain regulation through you. If you hold steady during this phase, something important happens. The pattern breaks. And when the pattern breaks, the power dynamic shifts permanently. Not because you dominated them, but because you removed yourself from the equation they depended on. You became emotionally non-compliant, and emotional non-compliance is deeply threatening to anyone who relies on control rather than connection. What most people never realize is that you don't need to become harder, colder, or more aggressive to stop toxic behavior. You need to become less available to it, less reactive, less explainable, less investable. Toxic people cannot survive in environments where their presence produces no emotional yield. This insight changes how you move through the world. You begin to value your internal state more than being understood. You choose regulation over reaction. You allow people to think what they think without rushing to correct it. And paradoxically, this is when respect begins to appear naturally. Not because you demanded it, but because your emotional independence made disrespect ineffective. When you understand that toxic people feed on access, not strength, you stop trying to prove how strong you are. You simply close the door quietly, and the silence that follows is not emptiness, it is peace. And once you experience what life feels like without being emotionally accessible to chaos, you realize something profound. The most powerful boundary you will ever set is the one that no longer requires explanation. Most people believe boundaries are something you say, a sentence, a statement, a line you draw with words. Don't talk to me like that. I won't tolerate this. This is my boundary. And while those sentences sound strong, they often fail in the very situations where boundaries matter most. Not because the words are wrong, but because words alone are not boundaries. They are announcements, and announcements without internal alignment are easily ignored. A real boundary is not verbal, it is neurological. It lives in your nervous system long before it ever reaches your mouth. If your body is tense while you're setting a boundary, if your voice carries urgency, if your mind is racing with the need to be understood or validated, the other person feels that immediately. They may not consciously know why, but they sense instability, and instability invites pressure, not respect. This is why so many people say, "I set boundaries but they don't work." What they really mean is, "I stated my limits, but my nervous system was still available." And availability is what toxic behavior feeds on. You can say no with your mouth and yes with your energy at the same time. Toxic people always listen to the energy. Emotional unreachability is the boundary beneath the boundary. It is not silence. It is not withdrawal. It is not emotional shutdown. It is the ability to remain regulated, steady, and internally grounded regardless of what someone else says or does. It is the moment you stop needing the other person to change in order for you to feel okay. Most people confuse emotional unreachability with coldness, but coldness is still reactive. Coldness is armor, and armor is heavy. Emotional unreachability is lighter than that. It's clarity without heat, presence without engagement, awareness without absorption. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. Maybe they criticized you, maybe they misrepresented you, maybe they crossed a line. Notice what happened inside your body. Did your chest tighten? Did your breathing shorten? Did your mind immediately start preparing a response? That internal shift is what toxic people feel, not the words you say next. That shift tells them whether the door is still open. A regulated nervous system sends a very different message. It says, I'm here, but I'm not available for this. No explanation, no justification, no performance. And because there's no emotional charge, there's nothing to push against. The interaction loses momentum. This is why emotional unreachability is so powerful. It removes friction. Toxic dynamics require friction to exist. They require resistance, defensiveness, emotional heat. When you remove that, the dynamic collapses under its own weight. From a psychological standpoint, boundaries fail when they are driven by fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of being misunderstood, fear of conflict, fear of abandonment. When you set a boundary from fear, you are still orienting yourself around the other person's response, and that means they still matter too much. Emotional unreachability is what happens when you no longer organize your behavior around someone else's reactions. You don't need them to agree. You don't need them to understand. You don't even need them to respect it immediately. You trust the boundary because you feel it internally. This is where philosophy quietly enters the room. If your sense of peace depends on external compliance, then your peace is fragile. Anyone can disrupt it. But if your peace comes from internal alignment, then other people's behavior becomes information rather than a threat. You can observe without absorbing. You can listen without internalizing. Emotionally unreachable people are not passive. They are precise. They know when to speak and when not to. They respond, but they do not react. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen, and choice is where power lies. There's an important distinction here. Emotional unreachability does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop over-functioning emotionally. You stop doing the emotional labor of stabilizing situations that are not yours to stabilize. You stop carrying conversations that require two regulated people when you are the only one doing the work. Toxic people often escalate when they sense this shift. They push harder, they become louder, they accuse, they attempt guilt. This is not strength, it's exposure. It reveals how dependent they were on your reactions. And this moment is critical, because if you hold your regulation here, the behavior changes. Not instantly, but inevitably. Neuroscience tells us that behavior is shaped by reinforcement. When a behavior no longer produces the desired emotional outcome, it extinguishes. Emotional unreachability removes reinforcement. There is no payoff, no surge, no reaction, just neutrality. And neutrality is deeply uncomfortable for someone seeking control. This is why emotional unreachability feels so counterintuitive at first. You're used to fixing, explaining, smoothing things over. You've been rewarded for being emotionally competent, but competence without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. And over time, it teaches others that your nervous system is available for their use. When you stop doing this, something subtle but profound happens. Your presence changes. You speak more slowly. You listen more carefully. You don't rush to fill silence, and silence becomes one of your most effective tools, not as punishment, as information. It tells the other person that the usual tactics are no longer working. People who respect you will adjust. People who rely on access will retreat. This is the sorting mechanism emotional unreachability creates. It doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't require cutting people off dramatically. It simply reveals who can meet you where you are and who cannot. Over time, you realize that boundaries are not something you defend. They are something you embody. You don't argue for them, you live them. And because there's no emotional charge, there's nothing for others to latch onto. This also changes how you see yourself. You begin to trust your internal state more than external validation. You stop chasing closure through conversation. You find closure through alignment. You learn that not every misunderstanding needs correction, and not every provocation needs a response. The most powerful moment is when you realize that calm is not something you negotiate for. It's something you choose. And once chosen, it changes the entire dynamic. Emotional unreachability is not about control over others. It's about stewardship of yourself. It's the decision to protect your nervous system as a finite, valuable resource. And when you do that consistently, people learn very quickly how to treat you. So here's the reflection to carry with you. If a boundary keeps being crossed, look beneath the words and ask where your emotional availability still lives. Because the strongest boundary you will ever set is not the one you explain. It's the one your nervous system no longer negotiates. Most people assume toxic people are fearless, that they thrive on confrontation, that they enjoy conflict and are energized by resistance. That assumption gives them too much credit. The truth is quieter and far more revealing. Toxic people do not fear confrontation. They fear irrelevance. They fear speaking into a space where their words no longer land. They fear pushing buttons that no longer exist. Confrontation actually feeds them. Raised voices, long explanations, emotional intensity, even firm pushback. These all confirm something important to them. They still matter. They are still influential. They still have the ability to disturb your internal world. And as long as that's true, they will continue. This is why arguing with toxic people rarely resolves anything. You believe you're addressing the issue. They experience it as engagement. And engagement is the reward. Even negative attention reinforces their sense of significance. Even conflict validates their presence. What truly unsettles toxic people is not being challenged. It's being rendered unnecessary. It's realizing that their words don't change your posture, your tone, your pace, or your peace. That realization is deeply destabilizing because it forces them to confront something they spend their lives avoiding: their own lack of internal control. Psychologically, many toxic behaviors are attempts to assert relevance. Interrupting, criticizing, provoking, correcting, dismissing. These are not signs of confidence. They are bids for importance. They say, "I need to matter here." And when those bids go unanswered emotionally, the behavior loses its purpose. This is where emotional independence becomes transformative. When you no longer look to others to regulate your self-worth, their behavior stops carrying weight. You listen without absorbing. You hear without internalizing. Their opinions become data, not directives. And data does not disturb the nervous system. Most people don't realize how much of their emotional life is organized around being reacted to, being agreed with, being validated, being seen as right. When those needs are present, anyone willing to withhold or distort validation gains power. Toxic people instinctively exploit this, not because they're evil, but because it works. When you remove your dependence on reaction, you remove their leverage. When you no longer need to win the exchange ends. When you stop trying to be understood by people invested in misunderstanding you, the tension dissolves. This is why toxic people often escalate when they feel ignored emotionally. They increase intensity, they sharpen language, they provoke more directly. This is not dominance. It's anxiety. It's the nervous system searching for a familiar response and not finding it. At that moment, you have a choice. You can re-engage and restore the old dynamic, or you can hold your ground internally and allow the discomfort to exist. That discomfort is temporary. The freedom that follows is permanent. From a philosophical perspective, this is about sovereignty. Who governs your internal state? If someone else's words can hijack your mood, your focus, your self-perception, then governance has been outsourced. Reclaiming it does not require force. It requires withdrawal of permission. Emotionally independent people don't announce this shift. They don't declare it. They simply stop responding in predictable ways. And unpredictability, when paired with calm, is unsettling to those who rely on control. You'll notice something interesting when you do this. The same people who once challenged you relentlessly begin to avoid certain topics, or avoid you altogether, not because they suddenly respect you, but because interacting with you no longer produces the emotional payoff they seek. This is the moment many people misinterpret. They think they've become intimidating, or cold, or distant. In reality, they've become neutral, and neutrality is powerful because it offers no surface for manipulation. Toxic people cannot tolerate neutrality for long. There is nothing to push against, nothing to distort, nothing to feed on, so they disengage, they find new environments, new people, new sources of reaction. This is not a loss, it's a release. What's important to understand is that emotional independence does not make you passive, it makes you precise. When you speak, it's intentional. When you stay silent, it's complete. You are no longer pulled into unnecessary exchanges to prove a point or protect an image. You begin to see how much energy you used to spend managing other people's perceptions, explaining your tone, clarifying your intentions, defending your character. Once that energy is reclaimed, it goes somewhere better, into your focus, your goals, your peace. There is also a moral clarity that comes with this shift. You realize that engaging endlessly with toxic behavior is not kindness, it's complicity. It teaches others that disruption works, that pressure yields access, that emotional invasion is tolerated. When you become emotionally independent, you stop reinforcing what harms you, and that is not selfish, it's responsible. This is especially difficult for people who are naturally empathetic, thoughtful, and emotionally intelligent. They've been rewarded their entire lives for understanding others. But understanding without boundaries becomes self-erasure. And over time, it attracts those who take without reciprocating. Emotional independence restores balance. It allows empathy without self-sacrifice, compassion without compliance, presence without absorption. The paradox is that once you stop needing to be reacted to, your presence becomes more impactful. People listen more closely. Your words carry more weight, not because you speak louder, but because you speak less. And here's the final truth to sit with. Toxic people don't stop because you finally out-argued them. They stop because you outgrew the need to engage. They stop when you no longer require their acknowledgement to validate your experience. So if there's one thing to remember, it's this. The moment you stop needing to matter to the wrong people is the moment they stop having power over you. And that moment is not dramatic, it's quiet, but it changes everything.